we need to go with gently, like I said, to say, I want to bear your burden in this. If you're a sinner, right, and we all are, do you think maybe, even if it's 90% their fault, that you have done something in it? Do you think maybe, perhaps, there could be a possibility of maybe like a tiny 10% is yours? I hope you could see that. And one of the key things we can do in going into conflict is to say, all right, I'm here to deal with this, and I will own 100% of my part. Whatever it is that I have done, let me own that, and then let me bring up my problem with them. Don't tell them they're 90% of the problem, though, okay? Don't do that. But if you go, and you try, and you even go gently, and it doesn't really go so well, sometimes we need to go and get help. If two people cannot reach an agreement in private, they should ask one or more objective people outside to meet with them to help them communicate effectively and glorify God together. Again, Ken Sande. It's fascinating. Like, sometimes we just say, oh, well, it's just about sin, right? Like, so Matthew 18 says, if your brother sins, then I bring some witnesses. That is true, but also go to 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 3 through 5. 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 3 through 5. Do you know not everyone goes to court because of a law being broken or a violation of a criminal act? In fact, most of us go to court over civil acts, do we not? That's why we go to civil court and the police take care of criminal court. They're separate spheres. And in 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 3 through 5, this is exactly what he's talking about. Civil court. Chapter 6, verse 1. Does any one of you, when he has a case against his neighbor, dare to go to the law before the unrighteous and not before the saints? Like, they're saying, we have a disagreement. We have perhaps a issue in our business, or we have a disagreement over our property line, and I'm taking you to court. And Paul says, don't. Verse 3, do you not know that Christians will judge angels? How much more the matters of this life? So if you have law of courts dealing with matters of this life, do you appoint them as judges who are of no account in the church? I say this to your shame. It is so that there is not among you one wise man who is able to decide between his brethren. But if brother goes to law against brother, and that before unbelievers, actually then it is already a defeat for you that you have lawsuits with one another. Why not rather be wronged? Why not rather be defrauded? Yes, there are some times where we have rightful conflicts, and the conflicts cannot be resolved, and you are tempted to say, all right, it's time to sue. Paul's saying, don't do that. Get help. The church is here. We don't come with a, hey, join my side, argue against me. We say, instead, isn't it better to be wronged, to be defrauded, than to dishonor Christ? We are on Christ's side together. So much more could be said with that, but I'm already over time. Thank you for listening. We've seen there's a temptation in the midst of victory towards greed. I could get more out of this if I just. Or there's a temptation for conflict. Why did they get more than me? Or why is this unequal and uneven? And Satan goes after us. And I want to remind us how we need to continue to rely upon God and not give up when we have even a great victory. Many of you have read Pilgrim's Progress, John Bunyan's wonderful magnum opus about the Christian life. And he said things so well. He had so many trials on his pilgrimage, and he won them over and over again, from Vanity Fair to Doubting Castle to the Sloss of Despond. And you think he gets to the very end, and he sees the celestial palace. And he's like, there it is. And you think, oh, great, here's this happy ending. He's going to walk straight across. But no, what does he have to do? It says Christian, has to cross the great waters. This is from a little kid's book version called Little Pilgrim's Big Journey. Parents, I highly recommend it for your kids if you'd like to. And they come to the waters, which is death. And they have to cross it. He is not this great hero of faith who is strong in his death. He is weak and stumbling in despair. Let me quote John Bunyan. Christian began to seek and sink. Christian began to sink. And crying out to his good friend Hopeful, he said, I sink in deep waters. The billows go over my head, all the ways over me. He's despairing. Satan seems like he's going to win. But thankfully, God gave Christian Hopeful, who stands and says, be of good cheer, my brother. I feel the bottom. It is good. The troubles and distresses that you go through in these waters are no sign that God has forsaken you, but they're sent to try you. Whether you will call to mind that which you have received of his goodness and live upon him in your distress. They're experiencing their final moments differently. And you could imagine, as sometimes we as Christians do, Hopeful condemns him and says, you fool, stand up. The ground is there. What's wrong with you? You've seen God be so good. Why are you doubting? Instead, he says, no. Christian, this is a trial. We will get through this together. He reminds him of the grace of God. Christians, do not be surprised that if you have to keep relying upon grace and upon the goodness of other Christians, not just through one victory, but until the very last victory, until the very end, we need the grace of God and we need to put on the whole armor of God every single day. Let's pray that we would do so.